that comes with sort of COVID-19 era quarantine. One thing I think that you did that was very interesting was you made a lot of your films available for free on Vimeo. I was just wondering,
do you keep losing him like I do?
Required you to do that?
Yeah,
what kind of
love it.
responses have you gotten?
I think it's great.
Oh no.
It's fine. Actually, it's funny because like there's something so strange about like video chat lag time, because it's like you froze, but we didn't lose anything. It was like as if we pressed pause. And so I'm confused about time. Like what happened in that time? I need someone to explain how that time functions. Right. I actually did get everything you said. There were just some pauses in it.
Oh, interesting. So anyway, am I better now?
A little bit, yeah. So you were asking about like putting my stuff up for free. Yeah, I mean, basically, you know, I don't know. Everyone was in a sort of panicked mode, and we're all stuck at home. And I just started to think, like, you know, if we're all stuck at home, like, how can you help? Yeah, and there's a lot of things I've been trying to do to help that are like a lot more significant than putting my videos on Vimeo for free, believe me. But putting them up on Vimeo for free was definitely a first thought I had, where I was like, I don't know, maybe people want to watch movies right now. So here's some movies. You know, and at least one, actually probably two of those, maybe all three of those videos. Technically, I shouldn't have done that, and like I'm probably breaking various contracts by doing so. But I don't think anyone's going to really care too much, and I just figured I'd leave them up until someone told me I had to take them down, or you know, maybe when things get back to normal, if that's a thing. We don't even know anymore what that means. But yeah, it's been great. It's actually been really great because, you know, when I first shared the videos, when I first like took the passwords off of them and said, oh, here, these are all open and public now, I thought, like, I don't really know if anyone wants to watch these, particularly like some of them are pretty dark. And I was like, this doesn't really seem like the right time for this like depressing, upsetting YouTube movie. But it's been a really good response. A lot of people have watched. Like, I've been able to like look at the stats, and I was really surprised at how many people have watched those films. So it's been really cool.
Yeah, and I think one interesting additional element to those films is, especially in the case of Nuts and The Pain of Others, you have, you know, whether from your own participation or that of others, there is this extra textual element. Like for Nuts, you have like that Notes on Nuts page that is a bunch of interesting annotations that offers a bunch of information. And then there was somebody who did a video response to The Pain of Others, like in its own documentary form. Could you talk to me about those?
Yeah, it's so cool. Like the thing you're referring to, the second thing you brought up, is a short film. It's about a half an hour long by a French artist named Chloe something. I forget her last name, Chloe something. And I kind of do know her last name. I just can't pronounce it because my ability to speak French is very poor, and I'm not going to try.
Okay.
So anyway, so she had tried to come watch The Pain of Others at Rotterdam when it was at the festival. And she walked out like 3 minutes into it and sent me an email several months later saying, you know, listen, I came to see your film at Rotterdam, and I left 3 minutes into it. I left because I felt really physically ill, and I really didn't want to watch it anymore. And so, you know, but then months later, I keep thinking about it and wishing that I had watched the whole thing. Could you send me a link? And I said, yeah, that's like the coolest. I've never gotten an email like that before. It was pretty cool. So I sent her a link, you know, and then a few months later, she got back to me again and said, like, actually, I'm doing a paper. I'm writing a paper on your film. Like, can we talk over Skype, just like we're doing now? And I said, sure. So I did like an interview with her. And she said, do you mind if I record this? It's just for a paper. I was like, yes, of course, you can record it for your paper. And then another few months go by. And then she said, actually, I made a film. I made a desktop documentary about my experience watching your film. It's called Watching the Pain of Others. And I thought, that's such I had no idea what to expect, because, you know, I thought she was like just some PhD student who was writing a paper. And then when I clicked on the link and watched her film, it was just so blown away. It's like such an amazing film, so much more interesting than mine. Certainly a really interesting compliment, you know, because she really goes very deep into like what it is about that film that is so disturbing to so many people. It was to her greatly disturbing, but she was fascinated and wanted to understand it as opposed to just being like, oh, I hate this and I don't, I want it to go away, which is what most of us do when we're kind of disturbed by something, like the easiest way to like make that feeling go away is to stop thinking about it. But she decided to like interrogate the feeling. And it was just like the biggest sense of honor I've ever had. Like I never had been like watched that closely. I mean, she just picks apart the film in this very deep way that was so cool. So that's a fun movie to watch. And that's also available for free on the internet.
It's Chloe Galabert Lene, I want to say, who is a great...
Much better than I would have done.
She's a terrific video essayist. She's last year she sort of topped the Sight and Sound poll of great video essays of the year with her collaboration with Kevin Lee, reenacting the future about Peter Watkins' Paris Commune film. She's as the nerd that I am and entrenched in video essay stuff, I really love and admire her work, and I think she's really special. And you're bringing this up, I'm like, oh, of course, I've seen this. That's how I knew this movie, because I had seen her.
Yeah. No, it really made the rounds, in the worlds that those types of films circulate. Really did. A lot of people saw it. And it brought a lot of attention back to my film. And it was interesting because a lot of people, I would say, who are like maybe like a little less smart than Chloe, sort of watched her film and thought what had just happened was like that she was making like a takedown, which was kind of just funny because I was like, and I kind of had to think about it. Like enough people sort of like tweeted about it as if that's what had happened, that I was like, is that what happened? And I'm just like an idiot and I'm like feeling honored by this. Like I had to like watch it again and be like, no, I don't think it's a takedown. If it's a takedown, it is so like subtle. Like
right.
I don't even know it.
I think people get fooled into thinking that because it's a video essay, it's a takedown, because that's the reason why most people make a video essay. And so that's what makes her film particularly interesting, is that it's something that exists in dialogue and in supplement to the pain of others.
Yeah, it does. It's totally it's a deep dialogue, and really cool. And that's why I think it is. And there's certainly like elements of critique in her work. I mean, as there would be with any sort of work in relationship to her work, but it's more her trying to understand her own responses to the work and less, and then trying to pick apart the film to understand like why she had those responses, like what was happening in my film. It's a really cool experience. I'm sure it'll never happen to me again.
Of investigation and critique will become more, if not necessarily popular, then more common.
Who's going to master this moment? You know what I mean? Like, on some level, artists just have to create. Like we're not just going to like wait until normal production resumes. It's going to be a really long time before normal production resumes, we think. So everything that I'm working on is either like there's certain things that had to be put on pause, and there's other things that are developing like in those cases, we're trying to develop them as like COVID proof projects. Like, okay, how do we take the limitations of the moment we're in and like make them feel appropriate, like work within them. And it's really going to inspire so much creativity, because that's all creativity is just like, or all art making is. It's just like, sort of erecting like constraints and then like really rigidly pretending like they're real for however long you need to, and so the sort of the tighter the constraints, the more interesting the act of like escaping those constraints is, and so like we're as far even like things like yesterday I watched a short video on the New York Times website. This is not like a filmmaker doing a work of art. It was just like a normal a normal video piece that the Times staff is pumping out like one a day of, right? but they had sort of responded to the constraints of the world we're in by having to do what they would normally do in person, like an interview, doing it this way, like we're doing right now. And then instead of just screen capturing that, they like staged it on a laptop in a messy office with a certain kind of light. And I was like, this is a very small thing. This is not like some amazing innovation, but I also had never seen it before. And it was just like one little kind of like tweak, like we have to make a video, like how can we make it look halfway decent, or at least like not totally expected under the constraints we're in. So I'm definitely in that mode. You know, the reason I was almost late to calling you guys is that I started a new film like last week. And so I've just been like, kind of in my own world. You know, if you'd asked me like, what do you want as an artist, like 2 months ago, I would have said like several months of no one bothering me and like not having anything in my calendar. And so I maybe at that moment was like in like an antique store holding like a special brass lantern or something. Maybe I like rubbed the lamp or something, but so I feel like some real like careful what you wish for circumstances here, because I'm not the only person who wish they had several months with nothing in their calendar.
Yeah, for sure. Can you say anything about what you're working on right now?
Not really, just that it's all archival. So, you know, I had sort of two projects that were kind of percolating in the background for a while. And then because the two that I'm like currently supposed to be like production on, like out shooting and traveling, I was supposed to be on the road, like shooting and traveling and shooting some more for the next months, several months. So because those got paused, I was able to kind of like bring these other projects up in the ranking of priority because I can do them.
For sure.
And I feel super fortunate because like if your livelihood depends on that type of production, you know, there's not anything you can do. Like there's really not a lot of like creative ways around that. You know, if you're a cinematographer, I don't know that you have work right now.
And I mean, as precarious as our business is too, is like, you know, critics and culture writers and stuff, sometimes I do feel somewhat fortunate to have like what few gigs I do have because we can do it all online. And that is certainly changing the way that we're all thinking about living and working and communicating. And, you know, even talking with you guys through Skype somehow lends a whole new context to something like The Pain of Others, where you are interacting with someone through a screen and that is all you know of that person. And that's one thing that sort of strikes me. The sense of limitation that you're working through and finding something very unique in that.
Yeah, limitations are so important, right? Like,
right.
You know, you sort of like have, and I think like now I'm a little older now. I've been making films for, you know, more than a decade. I had a lot of insecurities when I was starting out, like so many that I almost I didn't feel like I could do anything. There were very few things I felt comfortable doing as like a moving image artist. And in retrospect, it worked out great because I like doubled down on the very few things that I felt comfortable doing and like got really good at those things. And they were not things that everyone was doing because, like, for example, I still find it like super uncomfortable to shoot. Like, I just don't enjoy it at all. I think it's like really rude to point cameras at people. And like, I just feel really apologetic every minute of it. Like, I just can't wait for it to be over. And I don't like it. And I also don't really enjoy directing a crew in that environment, although I've gotten better at it, like as necessity has forced it on me. It's not like what I really love. What I love is editing. I just want to edit. I just want to research and write and edit. Like I just want to do those things. So, you know, because I didn't feel comfortable, for example, shooting, like I sort of developed a style that was more unique because most people do the shooting thing. Like most people are like, make a movie, make a documentary. I'll turn a camera on and I'll follow people in the world and do some interviews, you know, it's harder to find a unique way to do that, but it's not super hard to find a unique way to make a movie where everything you're trying to do is like, doesn't really make sense and doesn't involve cameras and doesn't involve crews. And so in retrospect, I could rewrite it as like, well, I was very intelligent and I had this like brilliant idea to like carve out a niche for myself. But in reality, I was just responding to my insecurities, which set up constraints on me that worked out well for me. You know, like it worked out really well. And I'm really pleased at this point in my life to have seen like my kind of snail's pace incrementalism when it comes to the acquisition of new storytelling skills. Like, again, I was so insecure, I still am really, that you know, I'm very gradual to like add another like sort of part, like thing that I used to avoid because I was afraid of it, but also because it was giving me constraints that are just useful to have. So now I have that problem more where I'm like, I could do anything. Now I feel like I actually could do anything, which is makes it more that I have to make choices about what I do and don't do with my films. Does that make any sense?
No, I think it totally does. Especially now that I think we lost Scout for a second. Hopefully he'll rejoin us. Yeah, bye, Scout. But I know he was very excited to talk with you. Yeah, I think there is, you know, now that you say that, you know, you started out with sort of those limitations and insecurities, and now with experience and having, you know, done things like shot interviews and done all that outside footage for Hail Satan, do you feel occasionally a pull to retreat to those limitations again?
Yeah, I do. And I also think it's also, that would be so boring. You know what I mean? Like, because the other thing is that like, I'm just not after mastery. Like mastery is not on the list of things that I care about at all. And that's also true with the kind of art I like. Like, I'm much less likely to like make sure to see like the latest masterpiece by the master person. Like I just probably won't bother. Like maybe I'll see it, but that didn't really get me that excited, you know? Whereas I always am excited to see like someone's first film. Like someone's first film is always like the most interesting, exciting, energizing experience for me, where you're like, oh, that's a little off. And like, that's weird. Like kind of interesting, you know, like just sort of like all this sort of like wackier stuff that comes out when someone's in that earlier stage of like not really knowing what they're doing yet is more exciting to me. So anyway, so I do kind of want to retreat, but I also I would never want to do the same thing over and over again, because that would be like super boring for me. So it's like a balance. Like I'm looking for like projects where, you know, there's the right proportion of stuff I feel really confident that I'm good at, or that I've done before, at least. And then things that I've never done before that make me feel really scared. And that proportion has to be just right for me. And that's probably true. I don't know.
No, I think so. You make a really interesting point about first films, because I also love first films from people. Because I think not just there's that sense of messiness, but I feel like a lot of really great first filmmakers make that movie like it's the last movie they're ever going to make. And so there's like there's like a career's worth of ideas just like thrown out on the table. Like I think of like Boots Riley's Sorry to Bother You, where it's just like you feel like he doesn't think he's going to get this chance ever again. He's going to do everything.
Totally.
Are there movies that are like that for you? Like, you know, you mentioned you love first films. Are there like ones that really have stood out to you as like really interesting first features for people?
Well, I thought like recently there was a bunch, like, you know, like last year at Sundance, I saw a film called Jawline that I really loved. And that was Liza Mandelup's first film. And it just had a lot of new ideas in it, you know, that you would expect from younger, new film. You know, I'm like already not that person anymore. And then, you know, more like on the nose is Zia Anger's film, My First Film, which I finally just saw over live stream last week. And it was just, I mean, I've been hearing about it for a year, and there's a reason, because it's like astonishing and amazing and one of a kind. And, you know, many imitators will follow, including, I'm sure, some things that I will do in the future. Like, you'll just mark my words, like there'll be some element, some like copycatting of some element of what Zia did with that performance soon. But yeah, those come to mind. There's a million more, of course.
Right. Scout, do you have any questions for Penny? because you dipped out for a second.
I did. It's true. I don't know what happened. You guys froze, and I was like, "Am I the problem, or are they the problem?"
We're all the problem today.
Everybody's the problem. I mean, like, I guess I don't know. I've always had like questions about the way that you operate because you know, I first heard about you from Robert Greene. Robert Greene talked about your work on, you know, this was like the sort of golden age of everybody being Facebook friends.
Yeah.
That was how I found out about a lot of new motion pictures. But you don't seem to exist in the same kind of like, you know, let's call them educational, inspirational documentary that gets a lot of the press nowadays. Like, oh God, am I gone again?
No, you're there.
No, you're here. We got you. Scout, no, we see you.
Oh no!
No! I feel like
wow, it's so sad. He thought we left him, but nobody left anyone. It was so sad.
It's very, very tragedy. I feel like Odysseus, or no, I feel like God, Orpheus. Well, God, see, I'm losing my mind.
How long have you been on this stream?
Looked behind us and saw Eurydice. I'm here. I'm back.
Amazing.
Interesting. I don't know. That's so strange.
Gotta keep it loose.
Yeah, I gotta keep it loosey goosey. We're flying by the seat of our pants here on Covid-eodrome.
Doing great.
Yes. Yeah, we're doing great. But one thing that I guess I forget where I was even going with this, so I'll start with a new question.
Okay.
One thing I love about your works is I feel like, you know, like another reason they sort of set themselves apart from that kind of very important sort of documentary journalism kind of the sort of ethnographic element of it. And I think there's something very anthropological about the way you explore not just like politics, but subculture. You know, from the people who, an entire subculture of people who believe in Morgellons, for instance, or the Church of Satan and that kind of stuff. And I was just wondering what sort of attracts you to those kinds of esoteric groups. You know what I mean?
I don't know. All I know is that, you know, like any other filmmaker, I have a million ideas, right? Like a bunch of ideas cross your mind. Like, this is the interesting film. This is the interesting film. And then there's something I've come to realize that there's something about like the bigger story, something about like the thing everyone's already talking about that I can't maintain interest in it to work on it. Like, because making films is so hard, right? You have to be like, do I want to spend like all of my emotional, psychological, spiritual energy for years on this subject, you know? And all I know is that like when it's something that I feel like other people are talking about already, I'm just not able to maintain the energy. And so I do think that keeps me away from like bigger, more topical social issues, even though I care about those things and I might be like interested in some of those stories. So I just can't bring myself to enter the true crime thing, because even though I watch the hell out of those movies and I'm glad someone else is making them, like I just don't feel comfortable as like a documentary filmmaker, like weighing in on whether someone murdered somebody. Like that doesn't really seem like it's in my lane. And even if it were presented in a very complex way, you know, like some of the best of true crime that's ever been, you know, you could be complicated about it or whatever. But at the end of the day, like what you're going to do is encourage a bunch of morons on Twitter to be like, Carol Baskin killed her husband.
Right.
You know, and like, I just don't want to I can't participate in that. So I find myself really anti-attracted to those like true crime stories. And then the kind of like more ripped from the headlines, like the things that Alex Gibney always does. I'm often very interested in those stories. Like I would have loved to have done a Theranos film, you know. Elizabeth Holmes is so interesting, of course, you know. So there's a lot of those kind of topics that I just don't, maybe it's just that I don't want to do anything that's happening right now. And I much prefer to have a little bit of like historical distance between me and something. I don't know, but this is a roundabout way of saying that like, it turns out that the topics that I'm interested in are not so esoteric that I'm like a very obscure artist making films that nobody sees, but they're also not at all esoteric. Like they're like a little bit esoteric, and that's a comfortable place to be in for like a documentary filmmaker often anyway. Like, you know, I'm not going to get a $10 million budget, but I don't really need that either for what I want to do. Nice. So what was the question you asked me? You sent me a text.
I did. I think you answered it in a roundabout way.
Yeah. I'm not doing anything with Obama's money, correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think it's fair, like, to say, like, after a while, like, what, you know, and it sounds super douchey, but like anyone in any marketplace needs to think about, like, what value do you add to the world? Like, what is your particular value? And, you know, there are lots of movies that get made where I don't think the filmmaker made any case for their particular value, but they were correct in understanding a topic that people would want to watch a movie about. You know what I mean? Like, that's fine, but I don't want to do anything where I can't feel very clearly like what value I bring to it that makes me feel like it should be something I do and not something that like someone else should do.
Right. I think answering that "so what" question is always really important in anything you do. And so I think that there's a very clear sort of utility in a lot of your works. And I love the way your films sort of exist in dialogue with the audience as well. And maybe this is what inspires things like video essays on your work. The fact that Nuts specifically plays with your expectations and sort of takes you on this ride, builds you into the ideology of John Romulus Brinkley before pulling the rug out from under you and realizing that you've been witness to a self-written hagiography of an individual and making that clear. And then even things like The Pain of Others, where the people are looking right at the screen and talking at you, and you feel complicit or a part of an audience to their pain. That stuff is very interesting. That really attracts me.
Yeah, and I think that maybe what you're picking up on, the way that I think about it, is that like in art or in documentary, like there's kind of like you as the artist, there's the subject, and then there's the audience, and there's kind of like a triangle where all those relationships are connected in different ways, right? And again, for most documentary filmmakers, they start from a position of like really interrogating the relationship between subject and author. And that's a more normal thing to do. If you're picking up a camera and you're like following someone around, like you're gonna be thinking about a lot about that relationship and less about the audience, particularly until you get way into the edit. It's so much about that first relationship. And because the first bunch of films I made, the people in them were dead, or I didn't know them and never met them and was never going to meet them, I was very much more focused on the part where I was interacting with the audience. Like I was just more thinking about it more frequently. Like, what is it that I'm trying to do with the audience at this moment? Like, you know, and trying to tweak like the different ways the audience thinks of like the artist as trustworthy or not, and then do something interesting with that. And then only when I did Hail Satan did I really get into an elementary level kind of engagement with the subject. Like, I had to negotiate access to a subject, like for the first time. Like, I mean, I really had never done that before. I'd never been like, hello, like stranger, I'd like to make a movie about you. Like, can we talk about it? And it was so uncomfortable for me that I couldn't have done it if I hadn't had my producing partner, Gabriel, who like really holds my hand through all those kinds of relationships. Because I still find it very awkward and uncomfortable, and would prefer to work with subjects that have passed away or that I'll never meet. But you know, you just it is a limitation that I'm not always wanting to be bound by anymore.
Right. Do you feel a comfort sort of having that level of distance from your subject?
I do. I mean, with The Pain of Others is a very specific case because like the particularities of that circumstance and like that population of people, I would never in a million years have gotten a camera and solicited interviews with the people who appear in my film. Just no, wouldn't have done it. Like, don't want to do it. Couldn't do it emotionally. Don't think anyone should do it ethically. Like, there's all kinds of problems with that. But the weird thing was, and one of the reasons I couldn't have done it is I know I wouldn't have been comfortable in the room. Like, I wouldn't have been comfortable in conversation with these women. But with that mediation, where they'd already presented themselves to the world and like handed that footage over to me, I felt very like I was able to get very close to them, and I was able to get very emotionally attuned to them and feel empathy for them in a way that I know I wouldn't have been able to do in the room. And so I do think there's a way that mediation can bring you closer, like, to people. If it gives you a sense of safety that you need for whatever reason in that interaction, it can actually be really helpful. So yeah, so I do think I like the distance, but it's not just about like holding people at a distance. I just think that it does something different. You know, like I have those home movies from Richard Nixon's aides, and yeah, they had passed away, but the distance came in the form, like there's silent home movies. You don't know what you're looking at. Like you don't know why they're filming this thing and who's that guy, and you know, where are we in the world and time, and yeah, anything about it. So that distance was there anyway, whether or not they were living or dead. The material gave me the distance.
Excellent. Well, I think we're running short on time. Scout, do you have anything else you want to ask Penny?
I mean, I have 1,000 things, but
right.
We'll do it again.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Super fun. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Definitely.
I think that, you know, your relationship to documentary and to images, I think, is going to prove very, very important for this moment in time in our relationship to images and objects and screens. And so I'm really excited to see where you go next. And I'm really looking forward to, you know, the sort of evolution of documentary, you know, in your wake.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. This was super fun, guys. Thanks again for asking me.
Yeah, and of course, it was a blast to have you on, Penny. Once again, for those of you who want to see her stuff, you can find it at vimeo.com/Lenny Payne. And you can also find Hail Satan. And I think also, well, no, you can find Hail Satan on Hulu. You can find Nuts on Amazon Prime if you've got it. Penny, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.